The Shawnee closely monitored both armies through their scouts from the moment of their departure, tracking their movements with precision. To prevent the two forces from uniting, Chief Cornstalk made the strategic decision to confront the Southern Army first. On the night of October 9th, approximately 500 Shawnee warriors crossed the Ohio River near the Kanawha, intending to launch a surprise attack before the soldiers could react at sunrise. Early on the morning of October 10th, a group of militiamen left the camp to hunt for fresh game to supplement their rations. About 2 miles from Point Pleasant, they unexpectedly encountered Shawnee warriors spread across a 5-acre field. The Shawnee fired upon the group, killing one soldier, but the others managed to flee back to camp and raise the alarm. Responding quickly, Colonel Lewis dispatched 2 contingents of 150 men each to counter what he believed was a large scouting party. Although the Shawnee lost the element of surprise, Chief Cornstalk proceeded with the attack, initiating what became the Battle of Point Pleasant. The ensuing battle was fierce and grueling, becoming a pivotal event in the conflict between Native American tribes and colonial militias. To understand the broader significance of the Battle of Point Pleasant, it is essential to examine the historical context of the 18th century. Beginning in the early 1700s, British colonists steadily expanded westward into Native American territories, resulting in a century marked by ongoing warfare and territorial disputes. The Treaty of Fort Stanwix in 1768 extended colonial claims westward, granting settlers access to lands in present-day West Virginia and Kentucky. However, the Shawnee and several other tribes were excluded from these negotiations, as the treaty was primarily conducted between British representatives and the Iroquois Confederacy. The Shawnee, along with other Native American groups, continued to use and share these lands for hunting, as they had for generations. The Ohio Valley, abundant in natural resources and strategically important, became a focal point of escalating tensions. As British settlers pushed further westward, Native American tribes, including the Shawnee, resisted fiercely to defend their ancestral lands. The Battle of Point Pleasant thus emerged from this broader struggle over control of the region. Prominent Virginians, including George Washington, had vested financial interests in acquiring western lands, seeking to profit from land speculation opportunities, often at the expense of Native American communities. Meanwhile, Native Americans were resolute in defending their ancestral homelands from encroaching settlers, which led to frequent skirmishes and raids on frontier settlements. These tensions culminated in 1774, with the Battle of Point Pleasant in October, following a spring and summer of violent clashes involving settlers, the Shawnee and the Mingos. With the goal of subduing the Native American resistance and facilitating westward expansion, Virginia Governor Lord Dunmore organized a dual-pronged military campaign to attack Shawnee villages north of the Ohio River. The First Army, consisting of 1,000 men and led by Colonel Andrew Lewis, advanced southwest from Camp Union, located in present-day Lewisburg, West Virginia. The Second Force, commanded by Lord Dunmore himself and comprising 1,700 men, moved southward from Fort Pitt. Lewis's army arrived at Point Pleasant, near the confluence of the Kanawha and Ohio rivers, on October 6th. Unbeknownst to the colonial forces, Shawnee scouts had been tracking both armies since their departure, maintaining an exact understanding of their movements. Seeking to prevent the two forces from converging, Chief Cornstalk devised a bold strategy to strike the Southern Army first. On the night of October 9th, approximately 500 Shawnee warriors stealthily crossed the Ohio River above the Kanawha, aiming to launch a surprise attack before the soldiers awoke at sunrise. In the early hours of October 10th, a group of militiamen ventured out from the camp to hunt for fresh game to supplement their rations. About 2 miles from Point Pleasant, they stumbled upon Shawnee warriors dispersed across a 5-acre field. The Shawnee opened fire, killing one soldier, but the remaining militiamen managed to escape and alert the camp. Reacting swiftly, Colonel Lewis dispatched 2 contingents of 150 men each to confront what he believed was a large Shawnee scouting party. Although the Shawnee lost the element of surprise, Chief Cornstalk resolved to press the attack. Recognizing the strategic advantage of striking the divided militia, he ordered his warriors to engage the 2 contingents. The ensuing Battle of Point Pleasant was intense and brutal, marking a pivotal moment in the escalating conflict over control of the Ohio Valley. Despite fierce resistance from both sides, the battle underscored the broader struggle between Native American tribes defending their lands and colonial forces intent on westward expansion. As the militia advanced nearly half a mile at around 6:30 a.m., the Shawnee launched a devastating ambush on the columns, inflicting heavy casualties on the front ranks. The initial shock caused the Eastern Militia column to waver and fall back under intense pressure from the Shawnee. Seizing the opportunity, the Shawnee concentrated their fire on the Western column, causing chaos. For about 30 minutes, the sound of steady gunfire and the sight of wounded soldiers returning to the main camp alerted Colonel Lewis to the gravity of the situation. Realizing that his forces were engaged in a full-scale battle, one he had not anticipated at Point Pleasant, Lewis quickly sent reinforcements to stabilize the line. Around 200 additional Colonial soldiers rushed to the front, helping to form a defensive line that stretched from the Ohio River on the left flank to the Canoe River on the right. Individual soldiers from the encampment joined the line wherever gaps appeared, bolstering the militia's position. The battlefield, shrouded in thick fog and heavy gun smoke, became a chaotic scene of close-quarters combat. Both sides sought cover behind rocks, trees, or stumps, turning the area into a deadly skirmish zone where each warrior and soldier fought his own battle. As the Shawnee warriors pushed in close, fierce hand-to-hand fighting broke out. Neither side could gain the upper hand, and neither was willing to retreat. Rifles and muskets became makeshift clubs, while tomahawks, knives, and even hands and feet were used in the brutal melee. Chief Cornstalk's towering figure and commanding voice rang out across the battlefield as he rallied his warriors, shouting, "Be strong! Be strong!" His bravery and leadership were evident as he moved across the front lines, encouraging his men and fighting valiantly. Despite being an obvious target, the Colonial soldiers failed to bring him down, with their shots missing the agile and determined leader. The relentless struggle continued for hours, with each side alternately surging forward and retreating under heavy fire. Shawnee warriors mocked the militia's fifes, shouting, "Why don't you whistle now?" referring to the instruments that had earlier called the Colonial companies to muster. However, the militia's flanks, anchored by the Ohio and Canoe rivers, prevented the Shawnee from executing their favored flanking maneuver to encircle the enemy. Surprisingly, the Shawnee attacked frontally, making bold and courageous charges led by their chiefs, Red Hawk, Blue Jacket, Black Hoof, Cornstalk, and his son. The river bottomland, littered with driftwood and rocky outcroppings, provided natural cover for both sides. Around 1 p.m., a coordinated push by the militia allowed them to gain control of a ridge fortified with logs and rocks, offering an advantageous defensive position. Gradually, the Shawnee fell back to a second ridge that stretched from the Ohio River to a nearby swamp. As the afternoon wore on, the intensity of the fighting began to wane, and the gunfire slowly diminished. As the ground fog lifted, the militia's rifle fire became more accurate, leveraging the superiority of their long rifles. The fierce hand-to-hand combat that had defined the morning gradually subsided, giving way to long-range shooting as the afternoon wore on. Despite facing a dwindling advantage, Chief Cornstalk made the unusual decision, especially for an outnumbered native force, to stand and fight. He understood the risks of significant casualties, but reasoned that retreating and allowing Colonel Andrew Lewis and Lord Dunmore to unite their armies would leave the Shawnee with no chance of prevailing. Late in the afternoon, Colonel Lewis attempted a decisive maneuver to turn the tide of the battle. He ordered 3 companies to flank the Shawnee line. These men withdrew from the main Colonial line and, under the cover of the Canoe River's banks, moved in a circular route. Following Crooked Creek, they emerged on a slight ridge behind the Shawnee's left rear and opened fire. The sudden assault took the Shawnee by surprise. Cornstalk, fully aware from his scouts that a second Colonial force under Lord Dunmore was approaching Point Pleasant, likely mistook the flanking force for Dunmore's column. This prompted him to initiate a withdrawal. He ordered his warriors to carry the wounded across the Ohio River, while selecting his best men to cover the retreat and continue the fight. Among the wounded was Cornstalk's brother, Silverheels, who was severely injured and carried to safety by their sister, Non-Halima. The Shawnee committed many of their dead to the river, as was customary, while skillfully retreating into the forests across the Ohio. When Lord Dunmore finally arrived around midnight, he found the Colonial camp in disarray. The wounded suffered immensely, with limited medical care available. The militia had sustained heavy losses, including numerous officers killed or injured. Colonel Lewis managed to hold the battlefield, but at a significant cost: 75 killed and 140 wounded, amounting to nearly a quarter of his force. Shawnee casualties were harder to estimate, as they typically removed their dead and wounded, but they likely lost around 50 men. Among the fallen was Pucksinwah, the father of the future Shawnee leader Tecumseh. 1 week after the battle at Point Pleasant, Colonel Lewis and his unit, after resting and recovering, crossed the Ohio River and marched north to join Lord Dunmore at Camp Charlotte, a fortified position near the Shawnee towns along the Scioto River. Though Chief Cornstalk may have been inclined to continue the resistance, the combined strength of the two colonial armies was overwhelming. Other Shawnee chiefs, recognizing the futility of further conflict, sought peace. By late October, they signed the Treaty of Camp Charlotte, effectively ending the campaign. As part of the peace negotiations, Chief Cornstalk pledged to surrender all white prisoners held by the various tribes and promised that native groups would cease hunting south of the Ohio River and stop harassing boats traveling along the river. In return, Lord Dunmore assured that no further white settlers would enter Kentucky and that no colonial settlements would be established north of the Ohio River. With the peace agreement concluded, though many on both sides doubted its longevity, the Virginia militiamen disbanded and began their journey home, while the Native American warriors returned to their villages. Despite the treaty's provisions, tensions between settlers and native tribes would persist, foreshadowing further conflicts in the years to come.